So I've created some AI through just using Blueprint, and in this case I have my main character who's got a flashlight that I can turn on by left mouse clicking. It's the toggle, and I have a enemy or NPC here that's just kind of patrolling around, but as soon as it gets in my flashlight it starts running away from me. And I have some launchers launching in the background. I did a video about that a while ago. And so this ghost, the idea is that the player will use the light to kind of usher the ghost over to objects in the environment that can be haunted. And up there ahead under the spotlight you can see a little breaker box on the wall, and that is hauntable. So when the breaker box is haunted, it activates, it plays an animation, and then I can capture that the hauntable object. It fires off an event when it's haunted, and I can capture that in a level blueprint and then do something in the level blueprint with it. And then when it's unhaunted, that also fires off an event. And so these big lights out here are controlled by that hauntable object firing those events in the level blueprint. And it looks pretty simple, and that's the idea. Just to show you again. And note that I did not use behavior trees for this. Everyone says that I should, but they're experimental, and everything I've heard about experimental stuff is that it could go away at a moment's notice without any warning at all, and your stuff will never work again. So now I want to get into how I was able to pull this off. And so the first thing is I have my main character. It's just like a simple little flashlight thing that toggles on and off. And but the meat of everything happens in both the hauntable object and in the Blue Ghost AI controller. So let's go in the Blue Ghost AI controller. And here, let me make this bigger. Here you can see that I've kind of broken this up and commented it fairly well, mostly for my own sanity, so I can see what's going on. I have several different states: the idle state where he patrols around, and then I have a flee state, which is when he's running from me when I have the flashlight on him, and then I have an interact state, which is basically a state when he's gone into a detectable radius of a hauntable object. It basically stops any possible fleeing or idling and takes over. And then I have a haunting state when the ghost is actually moving towards being on the object, the hauntable. And then I have a final state, haunting to flee. If this was able to be done with a proper state machine, I probably wouldn't have to have the haunting to flee state. I could probably do that in a function, but it just got really complex. So what I'm doing here is I have a bunch of nested ifs or nested branches that detect whether we should be in idle state, flee state, interact state, haunting state, or haunt to flee. And then I have a trap here. Since I'm checking this every tick, I have a trap here. So as soon as one of these bools becomes true, I immediately set it false and then move myself to that area. Instead of having a delay that loops these states back around, especially for fleeing and idling, what I did is I created a timer, and I set it to, I gave it a name, and then I have a custom event based on that timer, and which constantly loops this around. So when any of these whenever I move to a different state, I come through here, I set the bool, I come through here, set it to be false, and then I immediately clear the timer. So that way the previous state doesn't loop. What ended up happening was while I was in flee state, idle state would still be looping around, so it was kind of misleading as to what was going on. And then, so yeah, I mean, that's just kind of how I have it set up. So I'll just kind of walk through these states. So this is the idle state, and here I set the tether spot to the actor's location, wherever the designer puts them in the level, and then I call a function here, find wander point, and find wander point basically just finds a random point within a radius, a random magnitude via a random angle, and then I return that vector. So each time it's moving to a new point. Also, when you scare it and move to a new point, it will come back in there and set the tether spot again. So it's not it'll tether itself to wherever it ends up, just so it doesn't sit still. Flee state, I stop movement before I do anything, and that's kind of a paranoid step that I did back in Unreal Script. Anytime that I change states drastically while a move command was going on, sometimes the character would just move out of the world. So I use stop movement. And then I have another function here, determine move point, and this one is a giant beast of all sorts of stuff. And that basically, I get the direction the player is facing the character and how far we should move, and move them that distance. And then I also have this chunk here. If the trace hits something, we've hit a wall and we need to slide along the wall. So there's all sorts of like crazy vector math going on to get the AI to move across the wall. I'm not going to explain that in bitter detail. And then I return that point. And then I have an interact state, which is that state is actually fired from the interactable. Or the hauntable. So if I close the controller, we can look at the hauntable actor. We can see the component around this guy. He has got a trigger around him, and when we get into that trigger, I cast it to make sure that the target is using the or that the actor who came into the trigger is using a controller that's the Blue Ghost AI controller. And if he is, then I set the interact actor to be this hauntable. And then back in the Blue Ghost controller, I set it switches to interact. I clear that. I clear both timers. I set moving to haunt so that right now it can't be affected at all by your flashlight. You've got it there. It's going to haunt the thing whether you like it or not. I check to see if the interact actor is valid. If it is, then I cast it to check the hauntable spot. There's a special node inside that hauntable, because not all hauntables are going to be on the ground where the pawns can get to them. So I want a special spot where it can go, where it's going to initiate the haunt thing. I stop movement, and then I tell it to move to that hauntable spot. I delay for a second to allow it to get there, and then I set haunting state to be true. So if you remember back, that means that we're going to pop here, clear the haunting state trap, come into the haunting state. I set the actor hidden in game. I want it to hide, and then I disable his collision, and then I play a sound at the Blue Ghost's location, and then I spawn a particle effect, and it's actually just a sprite that I created from a screenshot of the guy in game, so it actually looks like the ghost is kind of like warping up to the object up there. I set a delay for that effect to play out. I check to see if the interact actor is valid, and if it is, I set it haunted. And then I I set the haunting variable to be true. And I set moving to haunt false. So if we go back, let's look at that set haunted function inside the hauntable. So what it does in here is it checks to see if we should set it haunting true or haunting false. If it's true, we're changing the color of the hauntable to be that blue color, the same as the ghost, just as a visual indicator to know that it's haunted. And then we play the animation of the handle rotating, and then I call the event on the hauntable, and that's where it fires out to the level blueprint. And then you can see inside the level blueprint that I have a bunch of checks in here. So when the haunted event fires off, we check to see if the lights are functioning, and if they are, we don't do anything. So if they aren't functioning, basically because it's a timed thing, we don't want to trigger it multiple times back and forth because it'll mess everything up. So we don't actually do anything in here unless the lights haven't been functioning. So we set the light functioning to be true, set a delay, and then if the construction lights are on, we come up here and toggle all of these work lights to be false. That's a different actor that I made. And then we set lights functioning to be false. And if the construction lights are not on, then we toggle a work light, play a sound, have a delay, toggle a work light, play a sound, have a delay, so it goes boom, 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 boom. And then we set the construction lights on, and then the lights functioning false. And then when we chase the ghost off of the hauntable object, we basically play that a different effect from the opposite direction, from the hauntable object back down to the spawn location, or the hauntable location, and then we play that same sound, or a different sound, have a delay for that effect to play out. We tell the hauntable that it's no longer haunted, and then we set the actor to be visible and give him collision again. We set the interact actor, which is like the hauntable object, we set it to be none, and then we clear our haunting, our idle, and we set our flee state to be true, and we have a slight delay, and I have a little special trap here. It's called the haunting do this once variable. It's such a hack. I wish we just had state machines inside Blueprint. It'd be so much easier. And that's it. So to see it again, there's a couple little bugs with it, but otherwise it works. Thanks for watching.